Hello and welcome to episode 66 of the Boot Nerds podcast. JayMike, we are like 2/3 of the way to 100. What's going on?
It's insane. I'm good. I'm still bald. I noticed that you're not bald. I'm very disappointed about that. So please fix. But otherwise, how are you?
I'm doing good. I feel like I'm getting past the awkward phase of like the hair where it's like, it's not quite short. It's not quite long. I feel like I'm getting to the long hair part. I don't know. I think it's looking better. I'm happy with it. I'm nowhere near tempted to shave my head yet. I might wear a hat on the next episode if that'll make people happy. But
I think that would actually look utterly ridiculous as well. So I would be totally happy with that. Yeah, please make that happen. But apart from my disappointment in you not shaving your head yet, because it's gonna happen, trust me. Today we have a pretty good show for you guys. Because not only are we going to talk, football boots as per usual, but we're also going to discuss something that's at least very close to my heart: the 5 best speed boots ever. And it's gonna be a funny one. We might end up disagreeing on something. We might also just end up agreeing on everything because we're awesome and we have super valid opinions. But let's see what happens. But before we get into the list, guys, of course, do remember to leave a like on the video if you like what we do. Of course, if you think we suck, you can also tell us that. It is what it is. But also, of course, don't forget to go subscribe to the podcast with the notifications on so you get the little ding every time we drop it every single week. Of course, also, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section right down below. And Josh, with that said, 5 best speed boots ever, 2 girls over drinks, and take it away.
Okay, let's first, because we kind of made a list together.
Yeah.
And we, for the most part, agreed. I actually thought that making this list was going to be a little bit more difficult than it was.
Yeah, it was.
But I think we need to clarify what this list, what the standard is to be on this list. Because I think that a speed boot obviously implies that it's designed for running quickly, quick changes of direction, stuff like that. So it has to be lightweight, has to be responsive, has to offer something along the lines of a thinner barefoot feel, but there is going to be some variation depending on the boot. And I also think that it has to represent a major jump in terms of innovation, potentially technology. And also, we didn't want to make this list about the most influential speed boots of all time, because then you're talking about stuff like 1998 Mercurial. Obviously, it's like the first ever speed boot, but is that really like an all-time amazing to actually play in today boot? I don't necessarily think so. So that was part of the criteria as well, is that all 5 of these boots are still good and very wearable and kind of like the best of the best by today's standards.
True. So yeah, to come back to my to what I said before, yeah, we ended up agreeing because we made the list together. but also that means that, as you say, boots like the Mercurial R9, the Match Mercs, some of the very early speed boots, of course, they're not going to be on the list because I don't think either of us will want to play in them today because football boots have just come so far in terms of comfort. Also, boots like, I was going to mention the Adidas 11 Pro 2 SLs or the Adipure 4 SLs, but we kind of agreed that they don't really apply as speed boots. So, just so you know that it's a very specific box we're looking into here.
Yeah, when you get into like what fits the mold of a speed boot, it's different. Like, cause now do you think Hypervenom Phantom 1? Because I know it's not really a speed boot, but it kind of is at the same time. I think if the list was most important speed boots of all time, it's a very different list. This is strictly the best performers. This is the best performers. So
these are basically the boots that you and I would wear today.
Yes. If we wanted to run as quickly as possible. Because we all know speed boots make you faster.
Absolutely. Just like ACC makes you better and SR4U laces actually make you disappear to your opponents.
I can either confirm or deny that. I can only respond to the feedback that I've gotten. And a lot of people claim that they run much more quickly.
That's epic.
So, hey, it is what it is. Try it for yourself. Most people are satisfied.
The boots or the laces.
I made a comment on Instagram because people like to joke about that, which I have no problem with, right? And the guy says it's not the player, it's the boots, and I'm like, no, it's not the boots, it's the laces.
It's the laces, yeah.
But anyway, so we have a top 5. I don't think we're gonna put this in any particular order because I hate doing that.
too much of a hassle, I think.
I hate those.
People
it's just
would
the worst.
destroy us anyway. Yeah.
So we're going to start with, I don't know. I think I talked about this I did a Predator Power Swerve retro review, and it occurred to me that was the final Predator that had all the classic Predator things. And I equated it to KFC original recipe fried chicken, where like, that's it. That's the reason why you go to KFC. That's the original recipe. If they don't have that anymore, people don't care. And that's what happened after the Predator Power Swerve when they changed the original recipe. And I think the final true original recipe for the Nike Mercurial line was the Mercurial Vapor 8.
Yes.
Has to be on this list. I think for me, the Vapor 8 was the first. If we really look back and like harshly criticize the Mercurial series up until that point, that's really the first time where I think you can argue that Nike got everything right on a Mercurial, in that it fit really well. It was super lightweight. It had aggressive traction. It was responsive. And this was something that was always hit or miss with the Mercurials. It was actually comfortable.
It was extremely comfortable, straight out of the box. It fit a lot of people because it allowed the upper to stretch a little bit. My only problem with the first couple of colorways was the durability. That was the only thing they didn't get right, but they actually fixed it on some of the later colorways with the little lip on the toe of the boot. Very, I wouldn't say it's an underrated Mercurial, but it's one of those forgotten Mercurials that people don't really mention that much anymore. Specifically, also because the Vapor 9s are very similar and also still very, very good. For me, it was just, this meant more, and it's still as playable, I would say, as the Vapor 9s. So for me, this would take the spot, the Vapor 8s.
Yeah, that for me was a really impressive boot, because I remember when that came out, I was not really in like a speed boot mode when it came to the boots that I really wanted to wear. But the Vapor 8 impressed me so much that I remember like trying to wear those in matches. And the one criticism I will have about that, aside from the durability, which wasn't incredible, and that's kind of something that's plagued the Mercurial series, especially in the early days, quite a bit. There was always some kind of issue, whether it was the upper separating or the heel studs breaking off on Vapor 8, because that was pretty common as well. But trying to wear that stud pattern on any kind of ground that was even remotely close to being hard was suicidal. There's no traction. There's so much like stud pressure. It's uncomfortable, quite frankly. That's really a stud pattern that's designed for the best possible fields.
But on the best possible fields, this was pretty amazing. And despite the fact that they gave us, like I say, only a glass fiber outsole, it was I really loved it. It was so snappy, so responsive. And it was a different outsole to what we see normally with the stock configuration, but it was very effective. And I just have fun memories of this, and I would still put these on today and probably enjoy myself a lot. Of course, it can't keep up with the modern Mercs in terms of lockdown and all that stuff, but it's still pretty good. And it just, as you say, it's kind of the last Mercurial to follow the original Mercurial recipe, but it's also one of the first really to get everything right and take the Mercurial into a new direction after the disasters that were the Superfly 2s and 3s and Vapor 7s and 6s and 5s for that matter. So it's kind of like the midpoint where things were kind of rounded up, things everything just, how do you say that in English? It all just worked out, and it also set the tone for future Mercurials.
Yeah,
so really nice. I
it's
think
funny
it has
when
to
you
be in there.
when you look back on the Mercurial history and really criticize it a little bit more harshly. It's amazing how it maintained its popularity from like Vapor 4 all the way up to 8, because 4, 5, 6, and 7, including the Superflies, not only were they like really expensive and all had like pretty serious flaws, they just weren't very good football boots to begin with. So it just shows the hype around the marketing power that Nike has. And I mean, quite frankly, the boots look cool, and I think that draws a lot of people to it. Also, a quick, very important note for a lot of viewers, the Vapor 8 was the first Mercurial to feature ACC technology.
Yes, which of course makes it the most influential football boot in history. Basically, we all know that is the most effective technology we've ever seen. So.
Yeah, very important. Okay.
Yeah.
Number 2. or number 4, depending if you want to go both forwards or backwards on this list. It doesn't really matter.
I don't think we're not ranking them anyway. So
we're not ranking them, so it doesn't matter.
I'm gonna point to the 2014 F50 Adizero. I always call it Samba. I don't know if it's technically the name of the boot or if people just call it like the 4th generation or whatever. But the one from 14, the one that had the hybrid touch vamp. This one, basically. One of my, I would say, one of my top 2 speed boots ever. This is a football boot I would still wear and enjoy today. And for me, that has kind of everything you need. It has stability. Well, it has enough stability. It has a super, super soft foot, very thin. Has a like leather-like touch. One of the best outsoles from Adidas, in my opinion, ever. Really, really effective when it comes to speed. I love the stud configuration. I love the amount of grip you get. It's very balanced. The snapback is ridiculously good. It's super lightweight, but it doesn't feel flimsy as the Adizero Primes did back in the day. So for me, it just hits all the right notes. And it was important because it kind of, it gave the Adizero the boost it needed to kind of come back and compete against the Mercurials that were really, really strong in 2014 with the Vapor 10.
Yeah. I think what's important about the 2014 F50, and now that you say it, the naming structure for the F50 Adizero series really sucked. Because they always just called it F50 Adizero. They never added a number. They never added a year. So you had the original F50, then you had the refresh, which was a new model, but they just called it F50 Adizero. Then they introduced My Coach. So we had like My Coach 1 and 2. And then eventually we just started using years. But they didn't even necessarily come out in their own years. But I think what was important about the 2014 model is that up until that point, obviously F50 Adizero was very popular. But I think that the Mercurial had gotten that much better in the same amount of time. And where the F50 was falling behind, especially when you're talking about the pure synthetic models, was just that, the quality of the synthetic. I don't think if you're comparing that to a Vapor 10, the Tahitian synthetic on a Vapor 10 was better than previous F50s up until that point, where this hybrid touch synthetic upper it's good. I still think it's one of the best synthetic uppers we've ever had from the Adi brand.
Oh, I definitely agree. And very influential. It's very low profile. You feel light on your toes. They're responsive, and the touch on the ball is sharp like you want it to, but it's not completely. You don't get the sting when you strike the ball. So very well balanced boot, despite weighing only 156 grams. I think it was back in the day, or 150 even. Might have been as low.
I also think that's an important era for speed boots in that up until that point. Would you say it's fair that like a lot of speed boots, you would pretty much, to a certain point, give up some comfort to have a certain feel that a speed boot has on offer? Where in 2014 with that boot and even the Vapor 10, I would say speed boots legitimately turned into like, hey, you can have that speed boot feel, but you don't have to be suffering in your boots anymore. Like they're actually properly comfortable football boots once broken in.
Yeah, I think if we look across all players today, we might see a bigger share of players wearing a speed boot, either a Mercurial or an X, or if we categorize the one as a speed boot. I don't think we should, but a lot of players are wearing speed boots that wouldn't wear speed boots maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I think you're right in saying that the Vapor 10s, maybe the Vapor 9s, the Vapor 10s at least, and the 2014 Adizeros were absolutely central to that shift. That more they basically became available to more people because they were more comfortable simply. And I think that's why it means a lot more than just being a great boot in itself, but it also signified a big change in direction alongside the Vapor 10.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's actually a very good point. I didn't really think about it before you started the sentence, and I thought, okay, he's going to say it's way more comfortable and way more accessible to everyone, and you said it. So yeah, very good point.
Next boot on the list, something, because we didn't want to make a super Nike heavy list, but unfortunately the Mercurial series is the Mercurial series. It's at this point, because technically the Predator had that advantage, but then they stopped it. So the Mercurial is the longest going line of football boots. Maybe Tiempo actually is older.
Tiempo. Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Scratch that. I don't know statistics.
Well, it's 4 years old, so Mercurial is tech. It's up there. Let's just put it like that.
It's important. It's very when you're talking speed boots. Mercurials are very important. However, this next boot isn't a Mercurial. It's from our Japanese friends. And it's a recent release. It's the made in Japan Mizuno Morelia Neo 2 Beta, which technically is a limited release, but we're counting it anyways because it's legitimately one of the most interesting football boots that I've ever worn.
Yes. I wouldn't necessarily say that I was as surprised as I think you were when you put it on, but it's one of those boots that really opened my eyes as to how much a proper build can do for the fit. Because, you and I, we have very different foot shapes. I have a really, really narrow foot, and your foot is probably slightly, there's more bulk. Maybe, is it flatter or is it just generally wider?
More flat, especially through the midfoot. Yeah.
And the thing is that I would say that the Neo 2 Betas is one of the narrowest boots on the market, yet it seemed like that when you wore them, they gave you an absolutely perfect fit, which was super weird for me to see. Apart from that, it's ridiculously light. You get some of the best kangaroo leather out there on the toe box. You get decent enough stability, I would say. And while the tooling could have been better, but it does a job. Put the Mercurial tooling on this, or the Furon tooling even on it, and we would be talking like serious heat here. But
yeah, like as an overall package, what surprised me about that boot is you're right. I think it's one of very few boots that fits really tight, but at the same time will probably fit anybody, which is super weird to see in something that fits that way. And also, we just talked about the 2014 F50 kind of introducing a truly comfortable speed boot. I don't think that there is a more comfortable speed boot than the Neo 2 Beta. At least I haven't worn one. It's really impressive. It's super lightweight. The touch is fantastic. The quality is made in Japan epic. It's a really impressive football boot.
I love that being a thing that you can actually say the quality is made in Japan epic. It's not just epic. It's like the next level in Japan.
It is. Well, it is. They have created their own standard above everybody else in that regard. I think that's fair.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's one of those boots that I don't think most people would have on their list unless you're really like a hardcore boot nerd that's actually tried them. Because I think if you just look at it, you're like, it's a Neo 2. It's the same boot since 2010. And quick kind of just thought on that. I think a lot of people might have the original leather 2010 F50 Adizero on this list. And fair shout for that boot. Also in 2010, guess what came out? The original Mizuno Morelia Neo, which is very similar to the Neo 2 that we have now. There haven't been a significant amount of changes. So for the most part, the Neo 2 Beta is the first significant evolution that we saw on something that was introduced 10 years ago now. And I think that if you took that original 2010 F50 Adizero and you really liked that, I think that the Neo 2 Beta is like the full potential of what that combination of features can be, if that makes sense.
That is a beautiful way of putting it. Realizing the full potential. My God, you should be you should make a YouTube channel about football boots because Yeah,
I have a book coming out later this year. So.
Wow. But you're absolutely right. And the thing with this is, as you say, it's ridiculously comfortable. And I think it's a good point that it might just fit unless you have a really weird foot type, but it might fit most people extremely well. And that's the crazy thing, because it's soft, it fits you extremely well, but you also really don't notice that it's there. So while it might be tight and snug enough to feel like a speed boot, it never gives you any, at least for me, it didn't give me any pressure points. It didn't give me any sense of being restricted, but it just supported me where I needed it. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but it's a very unique sensation, because most speed boots give you that, kind of like claustrophobic sensation where you're locked in and your foot is not going to move, and the speed boot is telling you, don't worry, I got this. But it just makes you feel like you're floating on a cloud while being stuck in a Formula One seat at the same time. Yeah,
like you're right. It fits really tight, but it doesn't feel like it's squeezing your feet. It's legitimately one of those boots that's comfortable enough and light enough to where it disappears. you forget that you're wearing boots. And I think I might have told this story on the podcast a long time ago, but when we were in Japan, we were making videos on these boots along with the Rebula 3. So both were about to come out around the same time frame, right? So the first half of the day, probably for a good 4 or 5 hours, we're running around in these Rebula 3s, and they're comfortable football boots. But after 4 or 5 hours of being on your feet on a pitch, you're like kind of ready. Like we were done. I was so sunburned at that point. Like I was just like, I can't believe we got to test out these other boots and make some more videos for another couple of hours. I was dreading it. And having not really been, like, I don't find the regular Neo 2 that comfortable for my foot type. So I was kind of expecting the Neo 2 Beta to just feel very similar to that. But to my surprise, when I put on that Beta, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, I feel like I'm running around in my socks now. This is great. I had energy again and it wasn't an issue at all. So that was a really pleasant surprise. So again, just goes to show how comfortable that boot actually is.
Imagine if you buy a pair of Betas and you put on SR4U laces, how light on your toes and quick you're going to feel. Now,
Man,
I'm just saying, I'm not making any judgment here. I'm just saying.
That's an overpowered combination.
Yeah, that's without a doubt. Right.
Okay, but that's enough Mizuno talk for one episode. We have to get our 10-minute Mizuno window in every episode of the Boot Nerds podcast.
T. Hakala is gonna love this. I'm gonna put in the Mizuno timestamp as a usual request. I love how we've come to a point where people just know that we have our mandatory Mizuno love rant just somewhere in the episode.
That's good.
Sorry, guys.
It's okay. It's our podcast. We can talk about what we want.
Exactly.
Next spot. So this next spot we broke up into 2 boots because we felt like it was only fair. I said Flyknit Ultra. You said Vapor 11. They're kind of variants of the same thing to a certain extent. So we're putting them both on this list. I realize that that's cheating, but again, it's our podcast. We can do what we want. We make the rules. So Vapor 11, I'll let you talk about that because that's one of your all-time favorites.
See, the Vapor 11 is, for me, I know a lot of people rave about how the Vapor 10s are some of the best Mercurials ever, and I get that, but for me, the Vapor 11s kind of took that a step further. They made the boot more sculpted. They still kept that super thin, very, very soft upper. They made it pointier. And they gave us the anatomical outsole as well. So a slightly more sculpted, more streamlined version of the Vapor 10. It's lighter, and this means that you get that completely. I'm gonna say sculpted again, but it's a very good way to describe the fit in these because they feel like they're painted on, but with enough structure to make you feel like you're actually sitting inside of something that's been designed for your foot shape. At least that's how I felt. Maybe because my foot is slim, so I'm not squeezing the boot in any way. I'm not challenging the shape of the boot, so to speak. But for me, this was such a perfect extension of my foot where I have support where I needed it and basically helping me transferring power to the ground exactly the way I wanted it. It was super thin, very sharp on the ball. It had a decent amount of grip. It wasn't the prime feature of the boot, but it was enough. It was balanced enough for me. And it was still so ridiculously light that when I felt on my toes and I got the snapback from the outsole, it was one of those very special sensations where I feel like everything is coming to a higher level, helping me getting propelled forward. Very special boot for me.
Yeah, I agree. From a concept standpoint, I think that the introduction of that anatomically shaped sole plate is a very underrated new technology. Because if you think about stepping in sand barefoot, and I think we've seen all these videos of various football boot brands, not just Nike, showing like somebody running on a treadmill barefoot, and you're seeing this like foot mapped pattern of how their foot is making contact with a flat surface, which is just the ground in this particular instance. Yeah. And never is it a perfectly flat footprint, right? It's not just the shape or the outline of a foot, which is what a sole plate would be. It's always like a little bit more contact here, a little bit less contact here. It's different. Everyone's foot's obviously going to be shaped differently. So for Nike to take a flat surface and just, it's not even shaped so much that it's like super drastic, but they just modified the shape just enough to where it's not perfectly flat, to where now, just like the upper, where the Mercurial was always known for like almost being kind of sucked in very tightly to your foot. They now did the same thing underneath your feet, and it just made the sensation of connection between your foot and the ball, your foot and the boot, that much more significant. And I think that's what they were really preaching with the whole Flyknit sock boot thing when they first launched that. But I think that the Vapor 11, even more so than the Superfly 5, if we're being honest, just did that exceptionally well.
Especially because with the laces, when you take the laces, you pull them tight, they squeeze your foot down into the plate. And it, the key word here being into, it's not onto the plate like it would be in the Vapor 10. Because here you actually, just because there's these slight curves following the most common shape of a foot, you get the sensation that you're sitting inside of something. And when you're sitting inside of something, your foot has less tendency to move. So at least it gave you the perception, for me at least, tell me if I'm completely wrong here, but I got the perception that I was sitting in something that was designed to keep me securely in place instead of having a bigger tendency to slide around. It was just an eye-opening experience for me because it really showed me how much a speed boot actually relies on your perception of being fast, right?
Yeah.
And this really changed that for me.
It's cool. It's like, I think the best way to explain it to somebody is if you put your hand on the sidewalk and you just slide it across, there's nothing resisting it aside from the cement scraping against your hand. Where if you had wet cement, I think a lot of people have done this, you put your handprint in the cement, you let it dry, and then you stick your hand perfectly in that handprint and you try to move it from side to side, it's stuck. Because it's perfect. You fit right in that spot. It's like sitting in
as a kid?
It's like jumping in a giant beanbag chair. It perfectly contours your body. Yeah. That's exactly the connection or the type of connection that you're getting from this slight bit of shaping to the base of the sole plate. It's really a genius idea, and I'm surprised that it took that long for a brand to do it. But it also uses a unique manufacturing process in that it's one single layer of material rather than multiple layers like most sole plates would be. So they did have to come up with something clever there. But we also said the Flyknit Ultra, which uses the exact same sole plate, so all of those same benefits. But I think that the Flyknit Upper, it was kind of a sneak preview of where football boots and where speed boots would go, especially the Mercurial line, but super soft, super comfortable, kind of similar vibes to a certain regard to the Morelia Neo 2 Beta for me, in that it's like the first Mercurial that I had ever worn where I'm like, wow, this is like a legitimately comfortable pair of football boots. Plus, I just liked the variation of having that extra grip on the ball provided by that kind of like heavy texturing you have on the upper. It's a really unique football boot with a unique set of features that it's just a shame that was a limited release from Nike, because I think if that had been the Vapor 12, people would have been a lot happier.
I think you're right. And I would just have loved to try it in my size. I'm not going to tire people with that story again, but in short, Nike didn't make it my size, and I'm really mad.
So those are both really good, which brings us to the final boot on this list, which again is, people are going to claim like recency bias on this particular pick, but I'm sorry. If you've worn all of these speed boots, I think it's pretty hard to argue that what Nike has right now in the form of the Mercurial Vapor 13 Elite isn't just one of the best speed boots of all time. And I guess you could lump in the Superfly as well if you like the whole collar thing, but what they have right now in the current Mercurial is special.
Yeah, I agree. This is, you said it's one of the best speed boots of all time. I would argue it is the best speed boot of all time, simply because it takes everything that's made other speed boots good and efficient and something that people love, and they've just managed to somehow squeeze it into one. You have the soft upper. You get that sock-like sensation from the collar, whether you go Superfly or Vapor, the shape doesn't really matter. It gives you that smooth transition into your foot. You have the anatomical outsole. You have those really aggressive bladed studs. You have the snapback. And then you have the lockdown as well because of the high tenacity yarns, which is absolutely brilliant. And we've seen this concept executed to various degrees of success over the years. We saw it on the Nitro charge where you want to keep tension to prevent the foot from sliding around. But here they've actually implemented into the upper to let it stay soft. It's like this Chinese finger trap, right? It lets you stay soft when you need it, but then it hardens up when you need that. Absolutely brilliant. Has The sharp touch in the ball, a little bit of grip, low pointy toe box. This is like, now that you said it so beautifully, realizing the full potential of what the Mercurial Vapor 1 gave us back in 2002. This is, what that boot, hopefully, what they envisioned that boot being back in 2002 when they had the technology. Now they have, and they've actually made something that takes that level for speed boot above and beyond everything we've seen so far. Absolute engineering marvel.
It's impressive. And we've both, I think, agreed on the podcast several times that it's a hard football boot for us to criticize. But I don't at the same time think that it's a perfect product, and it's taken me a little while to figure out what I would change, but I now have an answer to that, and I'm actually curious if you agree. The split sole, while I think it adds to the look of the boot, and I think that because I'm such a big fan of like Vapor 3 with its split sole, I like that look for a Mercurial, so I'm not mad from an aesthetic standpoint. But if you took the same sole plate from a Vapor 11 and you threw it on the Vapor 13, I think that you'd have a slightly more connected feel because the sole plate would end up being a little bit thinner because you'd have less layers of material. And I think you would ultimately end up with a lighter football boot, not by much, but it would also be lighter. And I think that would be the one criticism of the current Mercurial, is that the split sole aspect of it is more for looks than it is for outright performance.
Yeah, I agree. But that's the other thing. The big question is, how on earth where do you go for the Vapor 14? Like how are you going to do it? We asked the question, and apparently Nike asked the question when they did the Vapor 13, and they asked the players what should we change, and then say, don't change anything. It's perfect. And then they came back and gave them the Vapor 13 and said, look, we applied high tenacity yarns, and the players were like, okay, you made it even better. I just struggle to see where they're going to go from here. But that's also why I'm not working for the Nike Innovation Kitchen, but it's such a well-rounded product that
it's tough. Yeah. I know that's the list, folks. So if you're here for the list, that's it. But just on the topic of what's next for the Mercurial, I'm concerned because while I believe in Nike in terms of their ability to innovate when it seems like there's nowhere to go. We also just saw with the example of the Tiempo Legend 7, which was like, hey, this is a lot of tech incorporated into a kangaroo leather football boot that still feels and performs really well. So like how do you make it better? And while I think the Legend 8 maybe is objectively a little bit better in terms of certain performance characteristics, arguably more comfortable as well, the touch really suffered because they tried to maybe innovate too much on something that was already a really good combination of features. So what I'm concerned with the Vapor is, they could surprise us and make something even better somehow that nobody even thought of, or it's like they could make changes where it's like maybe from Superfly 4 to Superfly 5. I think people really liked the simplicity of the 4, where they went a little bit too much with the 5 and kind of, I think it was a little bit too thick of an upper. They made changes that shouldn't necessarily have been made. So we'll see what happens with Nike. Again, I have faith in them for the most part, but I feel like we've seen that a lot with Mercurials, where they make changes that are for the benefit of having a product that looks new and different rather than better.
Vapor 4 springs to mind. I mean, they had in my opinion, and I know you don't entirely agree, but in my opinion, they had a legitimately very good product in the Vapor 3. And then they decided for whatever reason to add a flipping lace cover. I mean, what the actual... It didn't do anything. It was just in a way, but they added it so they could tell a new story because they didn't really have anywhere new to go until they did the Vapor 4 SL. And that was...
Yeah, but you know what's funny about Vapor 4 is, and we can talk about this in another episode and completely, but I think that with Vapor 1, 2, 3, they made a boot that was so specific to fit a very specific foot type, to have a very specific feel. And they realized people really like that, but there's a lot of people that can't wear that boot. I was one of those people. Where with the Vapor 4, regardless of the addition of a lace cover and the way that it looked, which was somewhat controversial, the shape and fit of that boot was gigantic, like huge volume, huge added width. People complain about the Vapor being too tight now. That was like Nike's way of like, okay, here's a Mercurial that will legitimately fit everybody. But it kind of ruined, again, that original recipe of what made the Mercurial so special in the first place. And over the years, I think kind of at the Vapor 8 point is when they finally got a good balance of like, this is how a Mercurial is supposed to fit, but it's also comfortable and will still fit most people.
Yeah. And up until for me at least, 4 wasn't an entirely a failure, but from 4, slightly 4, but 5, 6, and 7 were like brutal. So they needed to come back with the 8, and it was massive. Massive, absolutely massive.
Cool.
But anyways, that was the list. That was just so yeah, we can discuss the Vapor 4 from now until the day we die, I guess. But let's move into some questions here. There is one from Ruruka Fernando. Hey Jay and Johan Cruyff, which was the worst and best Mercurial since knit was invented in 2014? I mean, we've kind of answered the best Mercurial question because that's the Vapor 13.
Yeah, it's Vapor 13 Elite for
which
sure.
Which is the worst?
Okay. It's not Superfly 4.
No.
It's not, because I think that's a really good boot. I think I'm putting Superfly 5 in that category of like not the best. But I'm also thinking, and this is simply based on what Nike eventually did with Vapor 13, I think I'd put Vapor 12 and Superfly 6 as the worst of the knitted Mercurials.
Okay.
I think I would, because I still think what's part of what the appeal was to a knitted upper was to have a sock-like sensation or something that felt somewhat like a sock. And I think you got that from the Superfly 4. I think you got that from the Superfly 5. And I think you still get that to a certain extent with the Vapor 13, where the Flyknit upper on the Vapor 12 and Superfly 6 was more trending towards kind of like plasticky, not so great synthetic rather than a true knitted upper. That would be my answer, at least. Feel free to disagree.
Oh yeah, I think I slightly do. I see where you're coming from, but I would probably have the Superfly 5 up there as the worst. That was the boot I think that was furthest away from what I feel a Mercurial should be. I'd rather have the Superfly 4 over the 6, I think. But yeah, the Superfly 7 and Vapor 13 are the best.
And then, without sounding like we're contradicting ourselves, I think that all of these Flyknit Mercurials have had positive qualities for the most part. I don't think that any of them were complete failures at all. But yeah, I think in terms of getting the maximum out of the knitted concept, I don't know. For me, it was that first generation of knitted Mercurials, both Vapor and Superfly in the 12 and 6 that, I don't know.
And coming back to the Superfly 5 with that ridiculous, tube color, it's just weird now. Like, I'm not a fan.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't.
And Mr. Byte 20. It's probably a reference to JT. Okay, Mr. BA JT 26, John Terry, we get it. Haha. Listening to this episode got me thinking, what about adding the energy sling-like technology from the Nitro Charge to a laceless football boot? Considering how effective it was, it could make a massive difference. And could you also fuse rubber elements on top of it for the Preds? What are your thoughts on that? I don't know. He mentions how it was really, how effective it was. I don't know about you, Josh, but, correct me if I'm completely wrong here, but I didn't find it, as effective as I think Adidas would have liked it to be, the energy sling.
Like, if we're talking about like genuine energy transfer that you can feel from a slightly stiffened sole plate, I don't think that you're really getting much return.
The energy sling was the
the containment thing. Sorry, I'm thinking of what was the thing on the sole plate?
Oh yeah, what was that called?
That was like not energy pulse, maybe power.
Maybe that was the weird zigzag thing.
The zigzag. Sorry, you're right. The energy sling was the rubber band. The band. Because I was going to say because I was thinking stiffer sole plate on a laceless boot is a bad idea at this point. Because I think when you add stiffness to the sole plate, now you're depending on that upper to move very closely with your foot to match the flex of the sole plate. But if the upper is not providing proper lockdown, the slippage and amount of movement you're going to have is going to be increased rather than lessened, which is obviously what you want to happen. You don't want your foot moving inside the boot. As far as like a stability aspect or a stability structure to the energy sling that was on the Nitro Charge, I think it worked. I think it maybe was pushed so far forward that it maybe didn't matter as much as it could have mattered if it was more towards the midfoot. But then you run into issues with, you kind of need some expansion through the midfoot to maintain comfort, because you never want like a pressure point, even if it's just a thin band, kind of grabbing your foot really tightly. That's what we saw with Superfly 1, 2, and 3, where you had these like strips of really stiff material that had no give. It makes for a very uncomfortable boot, potentially even blisters. But if you want to argue that the Energy Sling was really effective, part of the reason why it was effective is because it worked with the lacing system that allowed you to tighten it to your foot. So yeah, could something like that work on a laceless boot? I guess, but you have to have some way of being able to tighten and loosen it in order for it to work, at which point maybe like just put a lacing system on the boot.
I think for me, the concept behind the Energy Sling was good, but as you say, it was more like just a piece of rubber on the upper. Like, so it was just sitting there. It wasn't some sort of elasticated band that was sitting there, on its own. So it's keeping your foot locked down. It was sitting on the upper, meaning that when you lock the laces tight, it gave you support, it gave you stability, right? Stiffness, structure. And in that sense, yes, it gave you better lockdown. But as I saw it, if they actually needed to have a flexible piece that could move with the foot and tighten up when you move it, like we see it in the Vapor 13, for it to be really, really effective. I would like to see that in the future, and we might see that with knitted boots these days. I think it's easier to implement. But I don't think, with the placement from the Nitro Charge boots, I don't see, maybe I'm not smart enough, but I don't see how it would work just like slapping it on a laceless boot like that on a Copa, and then it would just be amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me.
No, but I think on the topic of lockdown on any football boot, the key word in lockdown is lock. You need to have something that is, you're tightening it to a point where that tension is going to be maintained. It's locked in place. That is what gives you lockdown. And that's the issue when you're talking about a laceless boot, is you don't have anything to you have tension. You have something that is forcing your foot into the boot to hold it in place. But that very same element that's giving you all of that tension also has the potential and ability to stretch upon force being applied to it. So you never have a true lock, which is why lockdown is inherently an issue. So it's a tricky thing with laceless, because I think is there a way to secure your foot in place without using laceless on a football boot? Yeah, probably. Someone's going to come up with it. But is that necessarily going to be better, or at the very least less bulky than just simple laces? I don't know. I think that's maybe part of the reason why we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. So to answer the question, no, I don't think it would work as well as he probably hoped, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, next one from Chris Holden. Hi, guys. What would you say are the most comfortable speed boots? Love the broadcast.
The comfortable speed boots at the moment, or?
Let's say at the moment, yeah.
Okay, at the moment. I mean, it has to be for me, it has to be the Beta. I think that's my answer for all time as well. I have to be honest.
Yeah, Beta's really comfortable. Furons are also they're comfortable in that very plush slipper-like way because they have that extra foam. And also I think the X19.1s aren't bad either. Of course, the Vapor 13s they are soft, but they're not comfortable. And neither are the X's. So I think I was also going to say Neo Betas, but Furons are also actually a solid shout.
Yeah, Furon X and X19.1, I actually agree with both of those as well.
Yeah. So Steph Pierre, hey guys, what is your favorite colorway pack of all time? 2 girls over drink, Josh, go.
Oh, geez.
Speaking of
actually, I have an answer. I have an answer because my incredible organization has allowed me to just glance over here at this pile of boxes, and there's one box that stands out because it's camouflaged. And I recently posted some pictures about it, and it got a very positive response because I think people forget about this, but the camo pack that Nike did back in, I don't remember if it was 2014 or 2015. I love the camo pack. I'm a sucker for camouflage in almost anything. So for me, remember there was a green, I think the camos were based on military camos from different countries. So you had the green Magista, you had the sand colored camo on the Hypervenom. The Tiempo had a green camo as well. And then the Superfly, I can't remember what color was the camo on the Superfly. I can't remember.
That was the dark green one. It was very dark green and black.
Okay. I have them somewhere. I just can't seem to remember. But that's
same.
That's one that I really, really liked. I have to admit.
Oh man, I was counting on you having to think for longer because now I have to think.
Also, you know what? A big shout out because I think it's so. I know 2010 World Cup would be a popular one for people as a really popular colorway pack, but also Euro 2016 was pretty sick. Also, Euro 2012.
The Clash pack. Oh man. Yeah, the Clash pack, really good. Elite pack from the World Cup and the Battle pack from Adidas in 2014, really high on my list. But the best, of course, has to be the Puma City pack.
That's good too. Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good one. I know the designer.
Yeah, he's
he talks about it every time I talk to him.
he's like, yeah, he's a bit of a jerk, I hear. Like, he's also losing his hair, right? Like, what a tool, man.
You know what else? I also really like the. I'm so bad at remembering years of tournaments, but the Euro boots 2000. Euro 2008.
Oh, from Adidas?
2008. The brown ones with the blue soles.
Yeah.
I know it's weird, but I really like those.
Yeah.
Also, remember the. Was that also for the Euro or was that for the World Cup? Remember that pack that Nike did for Italy in the gold with the blue?
Yeah,
that was a Tiempo and a T90.
Yeah. I have
that
one.
You have one. I don't have those. Those are also really sick. That was a cool pack. It was for the World Cup, right, Jay?
Yeah, that was 2006 World Cup.
Yes.
After they won it. So there was also a Vapor 3 and was there a Tiempo? I don't remember.
Yeah, there was a Tiempo for sure.
Right.
I'm pretty sure.
But these are nice. Big shout out DL Boot Room for these, by the way. Yeah, very nice. But I don't think they're up there. For me, it has to be World Cup 2010 Elite Pack or Clash Pack or Battle Pack.
Okay,
all beaten,
that's cool.
Of course, by the City Pack because, I also know the designer. He's actually a nice guy. on the deep, very deep down. It's a very deep hole, but. Yeah. Anyways, guys, that was the question for today. If you have any questions you want us to answer, let us know in the comment section right down below. Of course, if you completely disagree with our list or want to let us know what you feel are the best speed boots ever, it's also going on in the comment section right down below. Of course, before you bounce, make sure to leave a like on the video and go subscribe to the best boot podcast and probably the only boot podcast on YouTube by clicking the white bubble in the middle of the screen. You can also go and subscribe to Josh's channels over on his side of the screen or subscribe to Unisport by clicking the green bubble over my head. And with that said, guys, I've been JayMike and I approve this message.
Peace.